The first thing the Vrethkai ambassador did when he entered the Galactic Council chamber was laugh. Not a small laugh, a loud one, the kind that fills a room and makes everyone in it aware that the one laughing does not care what anyone thinks. His name was Gret. He was tall, covered in dark-scaled armor, and he had come to the council with a single purpose, to announce that the Vrethkai Dominion had chosen its next target. He had a list of resource-rich worlds that his people wanted. Earth was near the bottom of that list, almost an afterthought. The council chamber was a wide circular space inside the station Verathul, which orbited a dim orange star at the center of known space. 41 species had seats here. Some had been members for 10,000 years. Some had joined only recently. The seats rose in tiers around a central floor where speakers stood when they addressed the chamber. Gret stood on that floor now, arms open, voice loud. He spoke about expansion, about the natural right of strong civilizations to take what weaker ones could not defend. He named 3 worlds he wanted. He named the terms. He was not asking, he was informing. Most of the chamber sat in silence. A few delegates exchanged glances. The Pelhari observer, a junior delegate named Dara, wrote notes on her data pad and watched the room more than she watched the speaker. Then the oldest voice in the chamber spoke. It came from a seat near the back of the upper tier, almost hidden in the shadows. The delegate there was named Avan. He was Solon, one of the last of a species that had been part of the council for longer than most current member races had existed. His skin was gray and deeply lined. His eyes were pale, almost colorless. He moved slowly, always, as if the weight of years had settled permanently into his bones. Avan did not stand often. When he did, the chamber noticed. He stood now. The room went quiet in a way that it did not go quiet for anyone else. Not silent out of politeness. Silent out of something older and less comfortable than politeness. Avan looked at Gret, then he looked at the chamber, then he said 4 words. "Do not touch Earth." He sat back down. That was all. Gret stared at the old alien for a moment. Then he laughed again, though this time it was shorter. "Is that a threat, Elder, from a species with no fleet and no territory worth nomming?" Avan did not respond. He did not look at Gret again. The council moved on. Procedural votes, resource allocation discussions, a border dispute between 2 mid-tier races in the outer systems, normal business. Dara kept her eyes on Avan for a long time after he sat down. She was young by Pelhari standards, assigned to the council as an observer for what her superiors called a learning post. She had been told that council sessions were mostly slow and administrative, that real decisions happened in private rooms before the formal meetings, that her job was to watch and report and not speak unless spoken to. She had been watching Avan for 3 sessions now. He rarely spoke. When he did, it was brief. Other delegates treated his words with careful attention even when they did not follow his advice. But tonight something was different. His hands resting on the desk in front of him were not still. They pressed flat against the surface, then lifted slightly, then pressed again. A small movement, repetitive, the kind of thing a person does when they are holding something in. Dara wrote it down. She did not know why. It seemed important. After the session ended and the delegates filed out, she stayed in her seat for a while. The chamber emptied slowly. Staff moved between the tiers, clearing data screens and running standard maintenance checks. She thought about the way Avan had looked at the chamber before he spoke, not at Gret, at everyone else, as if he was not warning Gret at all, as if Gret was already decided, as if the warning was for the people who might follow. She pulled up what public records existed on Earth. It was not much. A small blue world in an unremarkable system, 3rd from a medium yellow star. The dominant species had been classified as sapient for only a few thousand years. They had achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. They had made no aggressive moves toward any council species. They had sent 2 diplomatic delegations to the council, both small, both quiet, both politely ignored. By every standard metric, Earth was a minor world, young civilization, limited known military, no significant territory, no powerful allies. Dara looked at those metrics for a long time. Then she looked at her note about Avon's hands. Something did not match. She could not say what, but something in the math of the evening did not add up. A species that looked like nothing on paper, and the oldest being in the chamber trembling at the mention of its name. She saved her notes and closed her pad. Across the station, in a private corridor near the archive wing, Avon walked alone. A younger Solon aide caught up with him and asked, quietly, if he wanted anything brought to his quarters. Avon shook his head. The aide hesitated, then asked, "Do you think they will listen?" Avon did not slow his pace. "No," he said, "they never do." He turned the corner and was gone. The Vrethkai War Council met for 11 minutes before voting to send the fleet. That was how long it took them to decide to attack Earth. Fleet Commander Dossa had presented the numbers. 22 warships, enough firepower to reduce a continent to ash, against an opponent with no confirmed fleet of comparable size, no known defensive network, no allied forces within response range. The vote was 15-0 in favor. Several Vrethkai commanders had not even waited to hear the final numbers before raising their hands. Dossa was given the mission himself. He accepted it without ceremony. It was not the kind of mission a commander celebrated. It was the kind you completed quickly and moved on from, the way you might note a small administrative task finished on a longer list. The fleet left Vrethkai space 8 days later. On the council station, the mission was known within hours. Several delegates watched the relay probes with mild interest. A few spoke privately about whether this would damage trade routes in the region. The ambassador from the Keth Dominion filed a formal concern about regional stability. It was logged, acknowledged, and set aside. Dara watched the departure data on her pad and felt something cold settle in her chest. She could not explain it. She tried to dismiss it. She went to her scheduled briefings, ate her meals, reviewed trade reports, but the cold stayed. Avon did not attend the council session that week. His aide reported he was in his private chamber. The fleet traveled for 61 days. Nothing happened during those 61 days, at least nothing visible. No human ships appeared at the edge of Vrethkai space. No message came from Earth to the council. No diplomatic contact of any kind. The humans said nothing. Dara found that silence strange. When the Pelhari had faced a border dispute with a neighboring system 30 years ago, there had been months of messages, requests for arbitration, formal protests filed with the council. That was what small civilizations did when threatened. They talked. They asked for help. They made their fear visible because visible fear invited protection. Earth said nothing, not one word. On day 62, the Vrethkai fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the outer edge of Earth's solar system. Commander Dossa ordered the standard approach formation and broadcast the Vrethkai demand signal on all open frequencies. The signal was a template. The Dominion used it for every new acquisition. Surrender of planetary authority, transfer of resource rights, symbolic submission from the planet's governing body within 72 hours. Dossa settled into his command seat and waited. 11 minutes passed. Then something happened that was not in any of the Vrethkai approach models. Every relay probe in the system came online at the same moment. Not council probes, human probes, small, almost invisible, placed throughout the outer system at distances and angles that only made sense if someone had planned for exactly this entry point. Someone who had known where the fleet would drop in before the fleet itself had finalized that position. Dossa looked at his sensor officer. The sensor officer looked back. Neither spoke. Then the humans came. They did not come from Earth. They came from 3 directions at once, from behind the system's gas giant, from the shadow of a large asteroid cluster, and from a position directly above the fleet's plane of travel that should have been empty open space. 40 ships, not larger than the Vrethkai vessels, not more heavily armored, but moving in patterns that DASA's tactical systems could not model cleanly. The movement data kept updating and correcting itself because the human ships were not holding formation in any recognizable way. There was no opening message, no demand for the Vrethkai to leave, no warning shot across the bow. The humans simply began. What followed lasted 5 hours and 40 minutes. DASA's after-action report, recovered later from a damaged command core, described it in fragmented entries. He had been trained in 37 known combat doctrines. The humans used none of them. They folded back when pressed, then struck from angles that required the Vrethkai ships to fire through their own formation to respond. They absorbed strikes that should have been disabling and kept moving. 3 times DASA thought he had one of them trapped. 3 times the ship was elsewhere before his weapons reached it. He lost his first ship at the 40-minute mark, his 6th at 2 hours. By the 3rd hour he had stopped trying to win and started trying to understand what was happening to him. He never did understand it. When it was over, no Vrethkai ship remained intact. Some were destroyed. Most were disabled and drifting. A handful of crew survived in emergency pods. Not one human ship had been destroyed. On the council station, the relay feed flickered and went dark for 4 seconds. When it came back, the feed showed an empty patch of space with debris spreading slowly outward from a central point. The chamber was completely silent. A Keth delegate said, barely above a whisper, "How long were they watching the approach?" No one answered. The actual answer, which Dara pieced together later from the probe placement data, was that Earth had begun tracking the Vrethkai fleet the day it left home space. 61 days. They had watched the entire journey and told no one. They had simply waited and planned, and when the moment came they had been exactly where they needed to be. Dara stared at the empty feed. She thought about the silence, 61 days of it, and she understood in a way she could not yet put into words that the silence had not been fear. Dara did not file her standard weekly report that night. She sat at the small desk in her quarters on the council station, the data pad dark in front of her, and thought about the probe placement. 61 days. Every angle covered. Entry point predicted before the fleet had confirmed it. She had run the numbers twice. The prediction required modeling Vrethkai strategic doctrine, fleet speed, and preferred approach vectors with an accuracy that her own people's military analysts would have struggled to match. The humans had done it quietly, from a planet that officially had no significant intelligence network beyond its own system. She picked up her pad and walked to the archive wing. Orvan was there. She had not known he would be, but somehow she was not surprised. He was seated at a low reading table near the back of the room, a physical tablet in his hands, the kind made of pressed mineral composite that some of the oldest species still used for records they considered important. The light above him was warm and amber. Every other light in the archive was off. He looked up when she entered. He did not look surprised either. She sat across from him without being invited. He did not object. "I need to understand what I just watched," she said. He placed the tablet on the table. "What do you think you watched?" A species with no record of significant military action destroying a Vrethkai fleet in under 6 hours without losing a single ship, using tactics that our modeling systems could not process in real time. She paused. "I want to know what you know about humans." Orvan was quiet for a long time. Not the quiet of someone deciding whether to speak, the quiet of someone deciding where to begin. "The Solan have been observing Earth for 41,000 years, he said finally. "Not as a council mandate, personally, species to species. We keep a record passed down to every generation of our leadership without exception." Dara waited. Other species watch young worlds for resources, for territory, for potential trade when they mature. We watch Earth because we made a decision 41,000 years ago that we have never regretted. He folded his hands on the table. We decided never to interfere with them in any way. No contact, no influence, no action of any kind that they might notice. What made you decide that? He was quiet again. We made a mistake, he said. A small one by our judgment at the time. A Solon survey team made contact with a human settlement. Early humans pre-civilization by any standard we used then. The team believed the contact was undetected, clean, no interaction. They were wrong. He paused. The humans had noticed. They tracked the survey craft for 3 days using methods our team did not believe they were capable of. Then they sent a message. Dara sat very still. What kind of message? A simple one. They had recorded the survey team's ship, its approach vector, its communication frequencies. They had analyzed the materials in the hull from trace samples. They sent all of it back to us, compressed into a signal format that took our analysts 6 months to decode. Inside the signal was one piece of information, the coordinates of the Solon home system. The archive room felt very quiet. They had found our home world, Dara said. 72 hours, Orvan said. From trace data, without faster-than-light travel, without any contact with any other spacefaring species. They had looked at the direction our ship came from, the wear patterns on the hull, the specific type of dust embedded in the plating, and they had worked backward to our system. He picked up the tablet again, turned it over in his hands. The message included no threats, no demands, no aggression of any kind. It was purely informational, a demonstration. A demonstration of what? That they had seen us, that they knew we existed, that if we were watching them they could find us. He looked at her. They were not angry, they were not hostile, they simply wanted us to know that the relationship was not as one-sided as we had assumed. Dara thought about that for a long time. What did the Solon do? We withdrew our observation teams. We moved all assets out of the region. We updated the record and passed it down. These beings on this world are not to be touched, not because they will destroy you immediately, because they are patient, they are thorough, and they do not forget. He set the tablet down. 41,000 years later, we still pass that record down. We still teach it to our children. It is the first lesson every Solon leader receives. And the Vrethkai did not know any of this. No one tells them. No one tells anyone. Information about human capability tends to provoke one of two responses, either disbelief or the desire to test it. Both are dangerous. He looked at her steadily. You are the first non-Solon I have told this to in my lifetime. Dara looked down at her data pad. The probe placement data was still on the screen. She thought about a species that could track a faster-than-light ship using trace hull samples. That had done so 41,000 years ago, without any of the technology they now possessed. What are they now, she asked quietly, compared to what they were then? Orvan was quiet for a moment. Considerably more patient, he said. The formal invitation to the human delegation was drafted by 7 different council subcommittees over 3 days, revised 14 times, and debated for 2 hours before it was sent. No one wanted to word it wrong. The final version was polite, measured. It called the incident a significant military engagement and expressed the Council's desire for open dialogue regarding Earth's role in regional security. It did not use the word demonstration. It did not use the word shocked. It said, very carefully, that the Council looked forward to a productive exchange. The human response arrived within 6 hours. They would send a delegation, 3 people. They would arrive in 12 days. 12 days, Dara noted. Not the standard 30-day diplomatic timeline. Not a request for additional time to prepare. 12 days, as if they had already known the invitation was coming and had started packing before it arrived. She said nothing about this to anyone. The delegation's ship was smaller than expected. It docked at Varathul without ceremony, without an escort request, without any of the usual pre-arrival communications that diplomatic missions sent ahead of themselves. The ship simply arrived, requested a berth, and docked cleanly. 3 humans walked off the ship and into the station. Their names were Rena, Bao, and a quiet man named Iral who carried a single case and said almost nothing during the entire visit. Rena led. She was a woman in her mid-40s with short, dark hair, steady eyes, and the kind of posture that did not shift based on who was in the room. Bao was younger, built broad, and smiled often in a way that seemed genuine rather than diplomatic. Iral watched everything. Dara met them at the docking bay as part of the council reception team. She shook Rena's hand, the human custom, which Rena offered without waiting to see if the Pelhari used it. The grip was firm and brief. "Thank you for coming," Dara said. "We were glad to," Rena said, and somehow it did not sound like a formal phrase. The session was held 2 days later. The council chamber was fuller than usual. Several delegates who rarely attended in person had made the journey to Varathul specifically for this meeting. Dara counted at least 9 species who had sent additional observers beyond their standard allotment. The 3 humans stood on the central floor. They did not bring a prepared statement. Rena had told the session coordinator they preferred a direct exchange. The first questions were careful. A delegate from the Marin Collective asked about Earth's current fleet composition. Rena said they were not in a position to share exact numbers, but that Earth maintained sufficient defense capacity for its needs. The delegate pressed, what did sufficient mean exactly? Rena said it meant what it said. A Keth Dominion delegate asked why Earth had never disclosed its military development to the Council. Rena looked at him with a calm expression and said they had not been asked. The Keth delegate said that proactive disclosure was a standard expectation for developing members. Rena said Earth was not yet a full council member and that the standard did not apply. She said it without sharpness, as a simple fact. Someone from the Haven systems asked how long Earth had been tracking Vrethkai activity. Rena said since the Vrethkai first began expanding into the region. A Haven delegate followed up. And how long had Earth known the fleet was coming specifically? Rena said 61 days. The chamber went very quiet. Bao, standing slightly behind Rena, smiled at nothing in particular. A smaller species delegate, Dara did not catch the name, raised a hand and asked the question that had been sitting in the room since the session began. How capable was Earth, really? Not in diplomatic language, actually. Rena looked at the delegate for a long moment. "We don't share that," she said. "Not because we are hiding something alarming, because precise capability information creates a specific kind of problem with neighbors." She paused. "When a species knows exactly how strong you are, they make calculations. They look for margins. They start to wonder if there is a combination of circumstances that might shift the math in their favor. We find that neighbors who do not know our exact limits tend to be better neighbors." The chamber was quiet. A Dominion delegate asked if Earth considered the Vrethkai matter closed. Rena said yes. The delegate asked if Earth intended any further action against the Vrethkai Dominion. Rena said no. The delegate asked how Earth could be certain the Vrethkai would not try again. Rena considered the question. The Vrethkai commanders who survived the engagement have been returned to their home space in functioning emergency vessels. Each vessel carried a copy of the full sensor record of the engagement, every angle, every exchange, every decision point. She let that sit for a moment. "They have seen exactly what happened. We believe that is sufficient." No one in the chamber asked for clarification on that point. After the session ended, delegates moved into private clusters the way they always did. Quiet conversations, careful exchanges. Dara watched from a distance. Iral, the quiet one, was standing near the chamber's outer wall, looking up at the curved ceiling. He had not spoken once during the entire session. As Dara watched, a very senior Keth official approached him and said something. Iral listened, then replied. The Keth official's posture changed in a way Dara had never seen a Keth official's posture change. He excused himself and walked away with quick steps. She never found out what Iral had said. Dara requested access to the deep archive 3 times before it was granted. The first request was declined without explanation. The second was acknowledged and then ignored. The third she sent directly to the Council's chief archivist with a formal research citation attached, listing her work as a study in pre-membership civilizational development patterns. That one was approved after 4 days with a note that access would be limited to records older than 15,000 years, and that nothing could be copied, only read on site. She agreed to the terms and went the next morning. The deep archive was 3 levels below the main station ring, in a section that had no windows and very little foot traffic. The air was cooler there and had a faint dry smell, the kind that comes from rooms where old things are stored and rarely disturbed. The archivist at the entrance was an elderly Marin with pale eyes who checked her credentials without speaking and led her to a reading terminal at the far end of a long row of stacked data cores. He told her the search function would return indexed results only, no full documents, and that any full document she wanted to view would need to be unlocked one at a time by his office. He told her not to expect fast turnaround on unlock requests. She thanked him and began. She searched Earth first. 31 results across a span of 38,000 years. Most were brief, survey notations, classification updates, distance measurements, but 7 of the results were flagged with a category marker she did not immediately recognize. The marker was a small symbol, 2 concentric circles with a line through them. She had to search the archive's own index to find out what it meant. The symbol indicated a record involving a resolved conflict event, meaning a situation in which hostility between a council species and a third party had occurred and then ended without formal arbitration. All 7 flagged records involved Earth. She requested the first document. The archivist unlocked it after 2 hours. She read it standing at the terminal because there was no chair. It was a survey report from 37,000 years ago, filed by a species called the Tevari. The Tevari no longer existed. They had been absorbed into the Keth Dominion approximately 20,000 years back. The report described a resource extraction operation the Tevari had begun near Earth system, in the asteroid belt. Early humans had apparently noticed the operation. There was no record of military engagement. The report simply noted that the Tevari had discontinued the operation and withdrawn from the region. The reason given was a single line: local conditions deemed non-viable. She read that line 4 times. She requested the second document, unlocked after 90 minutes. This one was older, 41,000 years, close to what Orvan had described, filed by an unnamed survey team operating under a species designation that no longer appeared in current council records. The document was partially corrupted and difficult to parse, but the key section was intact. The team had detected unusual signal activity from the planet below and had attempted to investigate. The report ended mid-sentence. A second entry, filed 11 days later by a different team, noted that the original team had returned to home space and that the region had been classified as sensitive. No further details. That was all. She worked through all 7 records over 2 days. Each one followed a pattern so consistent that by the 4th record she began writing down the structure before she read the content. Species approaches Earth or Earth system. Some form of activity occurs, almost never described in specific terms. The species withdraws. A classification note is added. The region goes quiet. The species, in most cases, either changed significantly or disappeared from council records within a few thousand years. The final record, the oldest, was from approximately 44,000 years ago. The species name was listed in a script so old that her translation tool returned only a rough approximation, something like the Wanderers, or possibly the far-reaching ones. The record was 3 lines long. It said that a contact event had occurred with a pre-sapient world, that the contact team had returned, and that the world had been added to a protected observation list. The last line was not part of the official record. It was a handwritten addition in the margin, in a different script, added at some point after the original entry. Her translation tool processed it slowly and returned a result she read twice to make sure she understood it. They were not pre-sapient. We were wrong, do not go back. Dara stood at the terminal for a long time without moving. She thought about humans, about a species that had been quietly, consistently, and without any announcement at all, making it clear to every civilization that came too close that the approach was a mistake. Not through war, not through formal deterrence, through something more patient and harder to categorize. She thought about the probe placement, the signal sent to the Solon 41,000 years ago. The Vrethkai fleet disassembled in under 6 hours with 0 losses. She thought about what Orvan had said, that the most dangerous thing about humans was not their weapons, that they remembered, that they did not want revenge, they wanted it to never happen again. She requested a copy of her notes from the archive, which the archivist denied under the access agreement. She memorized what she could and left. On the way back to her quarters, she passed 2 Keth officials in a corridor who were speaking in low voices. She caught one phrase before they saw her and stopped. "How long have they been like this?" She did not know which of them said it. She did not stop to find out. The Vrethkai Dominion did not send another fleet. What happened instead was quieter and in some ways more final. Without Dasa and the fleet commanders, the internal structure of the Dominion began to fracture along lines that had apparently been there for a long time, waiting for pressure. 3 outer Vrethkai territories declared independence within a month. 2 rival factions in the central government moved against each other in the same week. The Dominion did not collapse exactly. It compressed, folded inward, became something smaller and less coherent than it had been. The Council issued a formal statement of concern about regional stability and offered mediation. The Vrethkai did not respond. Dara filed her report. It took her 9 days to write. She had never written anything so carefully in her career. She included everything: Orvan's account of the Solon history with Earth, the 7 archive records, the pattern she had found, the marginal note in the oldest file, her analysis of the probe placement data, her observations of the human delegation in session. She included the moment Iral had spoken to the Keth official, and the official had walked away quickly, even though she had no idea what had been said. She included it because she thought the record should know it happened. She titled the report, "Preliminary Assessment of Human Civilizational Development and Regional Security Implications." It was the most read document on the Council archive system for the next 6 years. Eventually, it was referenced so often in policy discussions that the Council added it to the standard new member orientation package. Delegates arriving for their first session were given a copy along with their station maps and access credentials. Dara did not know this would happen when she filed it. She filed it because she thought the information was important and because someone needed to write it down. On the last day of the human delegation's visit, she found Rena in the station's public observation area, a wide curved corridor with a transparent outer wall that looked out into open space. Rena was standing at the glass, watching the stars. Bao was somewhere else. Iral was, as always, quietly present in the background near the corridor entrance. Dara walked up and stood beside her. They watched the stars together for a moment. "May I ask you something personal?" Dara said. "Yes," Rena said. "Do humans know what they are? To the rest of the galaxy, I mean. How you are seen?" Rena was quiet for a moment. "We have some idea. We listen carefully." "Are you aware of the archive records, the pattern?" Rena glanced at her. "Which records?" Dara described them briefly. The 7 entries, the consistent structure, the oldest note in the margin. She watched Rena's face as she spoke. Rena's expression did not change dramatically, but something moved behind her eyes, not surprise, something more like recognition. "No," she said slowly. "We were not aware of those specific records. We knew we had been watched at various points. We knew some of those interactions had happened. We did not know anyone had written them down." "Does it bother you that there is a 44,000-year pattern of civilizations approaching Earth and then withdrawing or disappearing?" Rena thought about that. Bother is not quite the right word. She looked back out at the stars. "We have a long memory, too. We know what was done to our people across our own history by each other mostly. Every atrocity we ever committed against ourselves is recorded. Every war, every collapse, every time we thought we had learned and then forgot and then had to learn again." She paused. "What came out of all of that was not a gentle people. We want to be gentle. We try very hard to be gentle, but we are not naive about what we are underneath that." "What are you underneath that?" Rena looked at her for a long moment. "Something that has survived everything it has ever faced," she said, "and made a choice, a real choice, not an easy one, to build something worth surviving for." She turned slightly toward Dara. "We are not out here to expand. We are not out here to dominate. We are out here because eventually every civilization has to meet its neighbors, and we would rather meet them on our own terms than have them arrive the way the Vrethkai did." Dara thought of Orvan's words. 41,000 years of a warning passed down through generations. She thought of the marginal note in the oldest archive file, added by someone who had understood something important and had written it in the margin so it would not be lost. "Orvan told me about the signal your ancestors sent to the Solon," Dara said. 41,000 years ago, the coordinates of their home system." Rena was quiet. "Was that a threat?" Dora asked. Rena looked back out at the stars. A long moment passed. "No," she said, "it was an introduction." The next morning the human ship undocked from Verathul and moved out into open space. Dara watched it from the observation corridor, the same place she had stood with Rena the night before. The ship was small against the dark. It did not look dangerous. It looked ordinary. She thought about everything she had learned in the past weeks, about patience and memory and the particular kind of quiet that is not fear, about what it meant to be a species that had already survived the worst of itself and come out the other side still choosing to build. She thought about the Vrethkai and their 11-minute vote. She thought about 61 days of silence. Then the human ship made its faster-than-light jump and was gone, and the space where it had been was just space again. Dara stood there for a while longer, then she went back to work.